All right, I believe we do have a quorum now. Are we ready to start?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting of the CRRMA Board, a little after 2 o'clock on April 15th. Are there any public comments?
There are no public comments.
Okay, has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes of our meeting on February 26th? If so, is there a motion to approve same?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 4 is the election of the RMA officers, vice chair, treasurer, secretary, and alternate secretary. These will be through to February 1st of 2011. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move, subject to objections from the board, that we re-elect the current slate of officers, Vice Chair being Adame, Treasurer being Marcus, Secretary Mr. McLaughlin, and Alternate Secretary Payan to another term.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I second that motion.
Any further discussion? If none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, item number 5, update, discussion, and possible action on the Loop 375 at I-10 America's Interchange Project procurement process. Mr. Tejas.
Raymond Tejas, Executive Director. As you'll recall, we've gone through several steps so far in the procurement process related to the Americas Interchange. At last month's meeting, the board authorized the staff to develop and issue an addendum to the procurement process, which resulted in a request for a best and final offer, of BAFO, if you will. And today we have with us Kurt Ashmos from our outside law firm, Locklord, Bissell and Liddell. He's going to run through a PowerPoint presentation to, again, kind of brief you all on what has happened to date and, in the end, provide a recommendation for an apparent best value proposer for the Americas Interchange project. Once we're done, I also have a resolution that includes the motion that I would request of the board, subject to, obviously, discussion and comments from the board. So with that, I'll turn that over to Mr. Ashmos.
Good afternoon. Kurt Ashmos, as he said. To start it, no one told me how to start it. They told me how to change it. They didn't tell me how to start it.
I think IT will take care of that for us.
It's up.
Yes.
All right. Is it going to be over here too or not?
That's yours, right?
Yeah.
What's up right there?
Okay. I can't read. Of course, I can't read that. But okay, that's okay. That's fine. I got mine here. That's fine. I'm so high tech.
See it right there once it comes on.
Okay, I've got it here. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to give you briefly. I know we've gone over some of this. Tim Daly was here a month ago and gave you some of this, but I think it's important to go back to the beginning and explain the whole process to get you where we are and to get to the really good part. But first I'm going to give you a project overview. We'll talk about the procurement process, and I'll tell you how we evaluate the evaluation process that we evaluated the proposals through. Then a BAFO process was the process that you approved last time, so best and final offer. We'll talk about that. Then we'll go to the recommendation, and then I'll tell you where we go from there. As everyone's well aware that's here, the project is the Americas Interchange project at the intersection of Interstate 10 and Loop 375 in southeast El Paso. The original scope that we were trying to build were the 4 red connectors that you see there, 4 of the 8 connectors. Eventually, this is going to have 8 direct connectors in the ultimate design of this intersection. We set out to build 4 of those. Our budget was $146 million. We estimated $120 million for the developer cost and $26 million for our costs. In that $120 million for the developer, they'll be providing all the construction, all the design, the quality assurance, community outreach. That's changed a little bit. TxDOT's going to be doing more of that, TxDOT and us. Bonding and insurance, utility relocation, and then there's a contingency fund in that $120 million.
Could I stop you for just a second?
Sure.
For some reason, our screens here, while I have it on hard copy, I'd almost prefer to look at it on the screen, and ours are not on the same page for some reason, so it's just probably a technical glitch. Mine is right now on project overview agenda, so, and it's changing, so unless I'm doing something, which I don't believe I am.
I've got it on project overview budget.
Now it seems to be moving back and forth. It was there? And then it
No, I just hit a
went
F5
back to
to
the beginning.
refresh.
F5.
F5 refreshes it?
Yeah, in case it was slow.
Okay. So I'm still not on the screen.
You're on the RMA cost?
Yeah, let me go back one and see if it happened. I'm on budget CRRMA costs.
Okay.
Goes back to budget developer costs. Did that happen?
We're good to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now just move forward to the budget CRMA costs. Our $26 million includes the procurement process and the stipends we will pay to the losing parties, the right-of-way acquisition, which TxDOT is doing for us, engineering and inspection, which is the process of overseeing the design builder during the construction, the quality assurance, staff and advisory services, and then our financing costs for the bond financing part of this. Our funding, to remind you, is coming $96 million from ARA funds, from both TxDOT and NPO combination. And then the remainder of the 146 will come from state infrastructure, bank loan backed by the TRZ, and then TxDOT funds via pass-through financing. The procurement process is a best value process, which means we are considering other factors other than cost. We're including cost, time, and then the technical approach, the technical proposals that they gave us. Just to remind you, this was a two-step process. We put out an RFQ, or a request for qualifications. We shortlisted a group of proposers. We had 3 proposers. We shortlisted all 3, qualified all 3 as folks that we thought could do the job. Step 2 was then the request for detailed proposals. Our shortlisted proposers were: Proposer A was Paso del Norte Constructors, which is led by Austin Bridge and Road. Proposer B was J.D. Abrams, and Proposer C was America's Gateway Builders, which is headed by Zachary Construction Corporation and CH2M Hill. Our schedule, going back, we issued our final RFDP on November 18th. We held some one-on-one meetings. We issued some addendum, and we received the proposals originally on February 11th. Now I want to talk a little bit about the evaluation process, how the best value process works, who was on the evaluation team, what our schedule was, and then finally to the results. The best value process, again, is not just about cost. It's about a technical component and a price component. The qualitative technical score values innovation, it's value-added concepts. It's an evaluation that's done without the benefit of the pricing information. So when we got their proposals, we get a technical proposal and a pricing proposal. And the technical proposal is reviewed by a different group of people than the people that look at the price. So the people that are looking at the technical proposal and scoring it have no knowledge of what the price scores were. The major categories of things that we look at were project management plan, development plan, community involvement, and then value-added concepts. More specifically, the qualitative technical score was points were assigned to each of these different areas: project management, quality, bridges and structures, landscape, right-of-way acquisition. You see the list there. And on each one of those items, a score was given. I can go to the next thing here. A rating was given: excellent, good, fair, poor, or unsatisfactory. And then that score was turned into a numerical score, and that provides the technical portion of the score, which is worth 30%. So there's 30 of the 100 points that we total go toward the technical score. And when I get to the end and I show you the chart, this will become more apparent. But the person with the best technical proposal gets 30 points. The other teams get a fraction of that based on how far off they are from that score. So if the winning score were 80, they get 30 points. Somebody that had 75 will get 75 divided by 80 times 30. The price proposal is they give us a development price, and then we adjust that for their schedule, how long their schedule is going to be. We had a schedule adjustment factor of $5,000 per day. So the proposer with the shortest schedule did not have an adjustment to their price. Everyone who is longer than that shortest schedule got $5,000 per day added to their schedule, added to their price factor, coming up with the price that we then analyzed. And there's a lane rental differential factor. That's a little bit harder to explain, but basically we gave them some rental rates. We're rewarding the person or the proposer that is going to shut down that intersection, the lanes in that intersection, the least. And we set, for instance, the main lanes of I-10 in the middle of the day or at rush hour. That would cost you a lot to close that down, so much so that no one would do it. Question?
The $5,000 per day over the shortest schedule, so as I understand it, the proposal that came in with the quickest ability to complete, the others behind that got a $5,000 per day penalty. But is there a guarantee on that when they commit to X number of months?
There's a penalty of $5,000 per day if on the other end if they don't do it. Yes.
So it's a guaranteed completion date that was entered by all the proposers.
Right.
Okay.
That then becomes the winning proposers' days then become the contract days that'll be in the contract, and anything over that they pay a $5,000 a day penalty.
Thank you.
Again, the lane rental, there was an adjustment for that. The final price proposal then is this, the development price adjusted for the schedule and the lane rental. And again, the winning, the person with the lowest price gets the full 70 points. The other folks get a fraction of that. Take the high again. This time we take the lowest price proposal as the numerator, and then the price proposal of the other person is the denominator, and you come up with a fraction. We then put the price factor together with the qualitative factor, 70% toward price, 30% toward the qualitative factor, and that's how we come to the best value proposal. The evaluation team. This was not just a couple people reading these and going through this. We have an oversight committee, a pass-fail advisor, a price evaluation team, a technical evaluation team, and a senior advisory committee, and then the next step we bring it to you at the CRRMA. Our oversight committee is made up of representatives of TxDOT and FHWA. They're there to make sure that the process is in accordance with their rules. So they came to most of our meetings. They were certainly there during all the important evaluation meetings. They don't score the proposals, but they're there to make sure that the process meets with their guidelines. Pass-fail advisor, I served with that. That was basically just to make sure that everybody turned in the right notebooks and gave us all the forms that we asked for. The price evaluation committee is, that sounds really fancy, but what we basically did was looked at the prices and worked all these formulas and stuff. So that really, we didn't take an engineer. The technical evaluation team, this is the meat of it, and you're going to see this is important. The evaluation selection recommendation committee are the people that score it. There's 3 folks, and they're aided by technical advisors. They evaluate the proposals and provide the actual qualitative scores based on the criteria established and set forth in our instructions to proposers. Those folks were Alan Schubert, who is the city engineer, and then Mike Burma and Henry Pearson both on the GEC team. They conduct the final qualitative scoring, and they went through the proposals themselves and scored them on all those categories I had preliminarily, but then they met for an entire day with those advisors from FHWA and TxDOT, and they went through every item and came to a consensus on whether that was a good, whether that was a fair, whether that was an excellent for each of those proposals. That took a full day, a very long day. They had the benefit of advice from technical advisors. All these folks who are all engineers also read it and scored it, but that was just their scores were given to the committee, the ESRC, but just for advice. They did not have to do what these folks did, but they looked at that and took the advice because some of these folks are experts in particular areas. Then there's a senior advisory committee of Brian Cassidy from my law firm and Kim Daly from the GEC team that basically took the technical score from these folks over here and the price from over here, and they were the only ones that knew what those two were, and they put those together. And as you'll recall, we received proposals initially in February 10th and 11th. We brought those in. We did the pass-fail analysis. We did the technical evaluation. We had the price proposal analysis, the ESRC consensus meeting, and then we put that together with the prices, and our prices exceeded where our budget, basically, for the portion that we had assigned to the developer. So last month on February 26th, Kim presented basically a lot of what I presented to you right there, and asked you to approve a recommendation to adjust the scope and issue what we call a BAFO, a request for a best and final offer. So that's where we're here. That's what we're here to talk about today. The rest is past. This is future, or this is recent past. We did a value engineering study. We then revised the project cost estimate. We obtained industry input. We met with all the proposers to ask, why were things higher? What could we do to make it lower? We issued revised documents, and then we evaluated those proposals. The value engineering study, in order to reduce the cost, did several things. It reduced the office space that they were required to provide for us, basically. Relaxed the key personnel requirements. There are certain requirements we had in there that we didn't think were required. That helped cut their costs. We clarified some drainage requirements. We relaxed the public involvement requirements. Not that it's not going to happen, but we're taking over that from them. We reduced some of the aesthetic enhancements. We reduced the pavement thickness. We reduced some of the QC testing requirements. And most importantly, this is what really reduced the price, was we optioned one direct connector. We were going to build 4. What we asked them to do as their base was to provide us the cost for 3 and give us an option for the 4th. So in case we do get the bids came in low, or we get some money from somewhere else in the future, we have a place to start to negotiate for that 4th connector. The westbound to southbound.
Excuse me, just 1 minute. I just want to make sure that as far as these value engineering studies, those were all covered and vetted with TxDOT to their satisfaction. And
Yeah, in fact, TxDOT led that proposal. And that was not just district here. That was came out of Austin. They put some of their best engineers on that, and we all worked together to come up with something that we thought would fit into the price. We did not want to have to stand here in front of you again and say we're over our budget. So if anything, we erred on the side of being low. If there is extra money, then we can start maybe putting some of these things back in. That's our hope. The schedule for this, we finished that we came out of here on the 26th. They finished that value engineering study on March 1st. We had some one-on-one meetings with the proposers. We issued our addendum, which was basically the BAFO. We had another one-on-one meeting to explain that. Their proposals came in on this Tuesday, April 13th, and here we are 2 days later. We've evaluated those proposals, and we're ready to go. And part of the reason it didn't take us long this time was because we all agreed, and the proposers agreed with this, that we would not have them resubmit a technical proposal. We would base our technical score on the technical proposal that they submitted to us and that we reviewed in February. The changes that we were making would not have affected their technical proposal very much, and they certainly did not want to spend the money to go and do that. We did have a pass-fail component in which they gave us 3 pages that showed us that they understood what we were trying to do, the adjustments that we had made in the scope, and told us what they were going to do to change their proposal. But that was basically a pass-fail, and we were relying on the old technical score. For the price proposal, we threw out the old price proposal, and we took in a new price proposal, and that's what we combined then with their technical score that they gave us in February. So remember that with 70% for the price, 30% for the technical to come up with the best value. Here's what we all, I think, we're waiting to look at, and let me go through this kind of line by line so you understand how this works. Proposer A, looking at that first line, that was the development price they gave us, 106, 107, and 108. Proposer A had the shortest, remember we're going to adjust this for schedule. So Proposer A had the shortest schedule. So they get, you see that blue 0, they get no adjustment. The Proposer B had said it would take 745 days, so the difference between 745 and 619 is 125. We multiply that times 5,000, and we, in essence, penalize them $630,000. That gets added to their price. Proposer C was going to take 861 days, so that's 242 days times 5,000. So 1,210,000 is added to their score. Then when we went to the lane rental differentiation factor, Proposer C had the lowest lane rental bank, meaning that they were going to close off lanes the least, have the least effect on traffic. So they had no adjustment there. The other folks had a dollar for dollar adjustment to their price, $917,000 and $1 million. So those things, those adjustments were made to the price. And then that line 7 is the proposer price value. And as you'll see, while they all changed, the relative difference between them did not change. A, B, and C remained in the same order price-wise. And they're all very close. I can tell you I've done several of these. This is very, very close. And that meant that the technical factor came, well, let me go one more thing. So A got the full 70 points like I talked about before because they had the lowest price. B had the second lowest price. So 107 divided by 108 times 70 equals 68.96, and I'm rounding off here. And the other folks, it's 107 divided by 110 times 70. They end up with 68.21. So those are the price scores. Now we've got to go to the technical. Those are very, very close, as you can see. Now we go to the technical scores that, again, were from February. The proposer with the lowest price had, unfortunately, also had the lowest technical score. So their score was 75. The folks with the second, proposer B with the second lowest price also had the second highest score, and then proposer C had the highest score. So proposer C gets the full 30 points. Proposer B and proposer A get a fraction of that 30 based on how close their score was to it. So it's that fraction. It's the 75 divided by 82 times 30 and 78.6 divided by 82 times 30. That's how you come to that qualitative factor. Then you add those price qualitative factor and the price factor and the qualitative factor together, and you end up with a photo finish, 97.43, 97.72, and 98.21. So very close. But according to our process, and the process that we laid out, and the rules we played by through these entire months, the result is that proposer C, America's Gateway, is the winner. Going back, they're the ones with the 98.21. So in many of the cases, if the prices are far apart, it's really hard for a technical score to overcome that. But the price proposals here were not a dead heat, but very, very close for a project this size. And so the technical score really, in this case, made the difference. So that's where we are. The recommendation of the apparent best value proposer, according to our the process that we have as America's Gateway Builders.
Kurt, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Does that price only include the 3 direct connectors? Now, what about the option for the
Four. We solicited a price from each of those, but they knew that they weren't going to be graded on that, so they didn't have the incentive to. We toyed with whether or not to try to include that somehow in the scoring. FHWA was very much against it because we didn't have the money, and they wanted us to be able to identify the money to do that before we could make that part of the score. So if we had graded them on the basis of 4 connectors when we only had the money to build 3, they didn't think that process matched up. So we went on the basis of the 3 on the reduced scope, but we asked for their bid on the 4th as a starting point to negotiate with them for that was their top price. They can't go higher than that, but we certainly aren't going to necessarily accept that price if we get the money to go for a 4th connector. So that is a place for us to start negotiations. You do not see that in here because that was not part of the scoring, and they knew that in advance.
And it's not a requirement.
It was a requirement that they give us a price, but it was not. They knew that it was not going to be scored.
Any other questions right now? You still have some. Go ahead.
No, go ahead and finish. Go ahead and finish.
Well, I was just going to tell you about next steps. Maybe we should probably stop right. Do you want to? Well, let me go. I'll finish with the next steps. If we go ahead and accept the recommendation today, the next step will be FHW and TxDOT will concur on what we do today. Then we'll finalize the contract with the best apparent value proposer, and there's very little that can be changed there. We already have negotiated this contract, so they can't come in and change a bunch of stuff. What we're going to do is correct any mistakes or ambiguities that are in there, and we're going to clarify proposal commitments. Remember that they had the highest proposal score, 82. The reason that they had that score is they promised to do certain things that were in addition to our what was our base deal. And so we are going to clarify with them those things, and we'll put that in an exhibit, and that will become part of the contract, because we're going to say, we scored you higher in this area because you said you were going to do A, B, and C, even though we were only required to do A and B. We liked that C part, so we're going to hold you to that. So that's what the negotiation process will be about. Then we'll get FHWA concurrence for the final contract, and then we'll come back to you for authority to execute the contract. If negotiations stalled, if something happened in the middle of those negotiations where the apparent best value proposer turns out they didn't understand something, there's a disconnect between something, we scored them high on something, and they said, no, we're really not going to do that. If the negotiations break down, then we would come back to you and ask to go to the next apparent best value proposer, which in this case would be proposer B. So that it is important, the scores, and the fact that they're very close, I think is important, because if we run into any problems with proposer C, we would come back to you, and even with a possible recommendation that we go to the next lowest proposer. Once we execute the contract, then it's issuance of notice to proceed when we're assured that we have all these financing things in place.
Just real quick, the 5,000,
Yes.
penalty per day, is that a standard, or we just pull it out of?
Well, it's if it were in other projects I've worked on where it was a toll project, it's a lot easier to come up with that number because you know how much you've got bonds that you're going to be paying interest on, and you have toll revenues that you're giving up. So sometimes those fees can be 20. I've seen them as high as 50,000 if that's the revenue stream that you're going to get per day from that. On a deal that's not a toll road, $5,000 is kind of a nuisance factor. That is a number that TxDOT has studied and come up with, and their traffic analysts have tried to quantify. It's a little mushy, but that is a number that gets used.
It's enough to be painful.
It's enough to be painful, but it doesn't overemphasize the
It's an
point.
arbitrary number in essence.
Yes. No, I wouldn't say totally arbitrary, because TxDOT does have studies to try to quantify that nuisance factor.
Other question? I just wanted to ask a couple of things, Kurt. On the technical score, you know, when you initially look at the numbers between 75, 78.6, and 82, I mean, those are relatively close. How does that really bear out? I mean, is the difference between 75 and 82, is that significant?
Well, if you go back to, go all the way back to that here, you know, and 82 meant that they averaged a good score, or higher than a good score. Everyone else, because they were lower than 80, 75 and 70, meant they averaged less than a good score. Okay. So, I mean, that's one way of saying it. We knew all three proposers can build the job. We knew they could do it. They've proposed before. They know how to do proposals. We knew they were good. We tried to set up some difference here, some range, so that we can differentiate proposals. And I think the general consensus was, from the scores, was that the proposer C, the America's Gateways Builders, remember, that's an average of all. I mean, it's of all these places. They may have been weaker in some areas, but stronger in others. That was the deal. And like I say, in a lot of projects, if there had been a $5 million difference in the price, they would not have been able to overcome that. The point was worth, I think, quick math, somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 each technical point. The reason to have the technical point and do it not just on prices is to make them, there's a synergy here. The more they think about it and the more they have to put effort into the technical proposal, it makes them come up with technical solutions that we think help the price. So it's not just the technical score. As they do that, they're also, we think, honing their price proposal, and we're getting a better price. And remember that we now own we own the proposals or the concepts that we've gotten from the other two bidders. To the extent they did something, an alternative technical concept that we like, that could cut the cost, we can't impose that price on America's Gateway Builders, but we can go to them and say, we like this concept and we think it should save price. And these guys, proposer B, said it would save, you know, this much money. What do you think about implementing that? And we can negotiate with them, in essence, to bring their price down. Because that's the reason for the stipend. I know early on when we approved the $125,000 stipend for the losing parties, that doesn't nearly
about 10% of their actual cost.
Of their actual cost, but that's a good bargain because we now own those concepts.
Okay, and the process that we're using here is that a pretty standard process?
Yes, Kim Daly, the person that from the GEC team from Jacobs who presented to you last month, in her other hat that she wears, she has a desk inside of the Texas Turnpike Authority, and this is the process that TxDOT uses for their design build contracts. And the RMAs that I also represent, other RMAs, use a very similar project. They may tweak something here or something there, But basically, this has been the accepted process for evaluation, with different emphasis on price versus technical. And in fact, we had more emphasis on price than some. Sometimes it's a 60-40 split rather than a 70-30. On a 60-40 split, proposers, America's Gateways would have won by even more. I don't know where you would have had to go for them to lose, maybe a 90-10 or an 85-15 or something before they would lose.
And also, all three of our proposers, I mean, based on your experience, they're very familiar with this process.
They have all proposed on other.
Yeah, there's nothing really new to them.
No, and that's part of the reason that we go through that long. You say, well, why can't they just give us a proposal? We go through a long process in which we put out all of these contract documents, and we in essence negotiate the contract with all three of them before they propose. So at the time they propose, they know exactly what they're proposing on, and they've had a lot of input into what it is they're proposing on, and the instructions to proposers are ad nauseum legalese and engineering detail to tell them what it is we're looking for. So their proposals come in, knowing every area that they're supposed to cover. We don't get proposals where they just forget to do something. It's these folks all know how to do it. It's just who did it better this time around.
Okay.
A quick one. Again, just on the technical advisors, there's about 7 of them, right?
Right.
But who do they work for, or where'd they come from?
They are all related to are they Jacobs, PBS&J folks?
Okay, so they belong to the
They're all GEC folks related or subs of the GEC. They're all engineers. I think all 7 of those folks are engineers. Is anybody not an engineer? All but one's engineer.
You identified all of them except these guys, so. And you had where they belonged to in the previous.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Questions?
Am I right in understanding that we approximately had a budget of $120 million for this piece, correct?
Yes.
So with America's Gateway coming in at 108, we had sent out kind of a revised set of requirements. Would we go back and look at things like asphalt thickness again to determine if we don't have to maintain the road as often, to look at try to maybe enhance perhaps the package that was bid on now that we've selected?
I'm not an engineer and I can't really speak for all them, but and TxDOT's going to have a say in this. But yes, I mean, I think that what we're going to do with that 11, remember we want to hold back some contingency, but that's 11 or 12 million we don't really need as a contingency. So I do think there'll be a reevaluation of can we add some things back in that we took out. That $10 million is not going to get us by itself the fourth direct connector. But if there were other funds at some point in time that could supplement those, maybe we're talking about that at some point. But we didn't have the money now, and we couldn't identify the source, so we couldn't include it as our base configuration.
One of the things that stood out when I was looking at was the difference in the day's schedule, 619 to 861, pretty substantial. So it seems like, and I understand that one was closing more lanes and getting things done more quickly. The other one was closing less lanes and less inconvenience. But it'd be great if we could look at trying to move those days down and get it closer towards a median number. So to get this project finished, if that was indeed the case. So
they have the incentive to do that now because they will get $5,000 a day for. They actually do we have an incentive as well as penalties? Mike, is that right? Do we have incentives as well as penalties? Do they get? You guys probably know. Do we get $5,000 a day for finishing early? I think there's an incentive. So it's in their benefit to get done sooner also. But it would be in the best of all worlds, we get the person with the lowest price, the lowest, the highest score, the shortest number of days. But it just usually doesn't always work out that way. And we think the process, or TxDOT and us, think that the process is fair. Really, this technical score really comes in when the prices are this close. I know $1 million seems like a big difference, but when you're talking about a relative 109 versus 110, it's not as big. And we certainly will entertain any suggestions that the board might have for how we tweak this process next time.
Was not, as far as the number of days, to kind of tag on to what Scott was asking, there was a maximum number of days that were
Yeah, they didn't.
allowed.
Yeah, they didn't. It wasn't just sent out there into a black hole. It was 885. If we had set, or TxDOT had set, we together with TxDOT had set, that's the standard. You can't go beyond 885. So
So they're within the.
they're within their rights to do that, and the 619 was a plus, but it wasn't required.
What was the final cost for the process? Just
That I don't know.
I can get that for you. As you know, it's ongoing still.
I understand, but up to now, we've engaged a lot of people, and a lot of time. So I just wondered, because you talked about tweaking the process, I just wondered how much money we spent that we could have maybe put towards the project.
I can get that for you. I'll send that to the board later.
And then secondly, I assume we're going to try and use as much of these funds as possible, right? Subject to what do we want to hold back? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Because what happens to the funds we don't use?
There won't be any funds that won't be used.
Okay.
We will build as much projects as we can.
Other questions, Susan?
One question. How long do you estimate the negotiation process to take?
Well, we hope to come back next month with.
Next month?
And part of this is just for them to get some of their ducks in a row. They've got to come up with a legal opinion. They've got to get their bonding and their insurance and things. The actual time spent on negotiation, like I said, there's not much to negotiate other than we're going to provide them with a list of things that we want to add to the contract that we think they promised us. And if they say you're right, it'll take a day.
I would mention too, though, now we're starting to dovetail with the financing issues and all the other outstanding components to this project. So, as you probably have read recently, the city of El Paso is developing the 2 new transportation reinvestment zones. One of those will be one of the financing components for this project. So, the city is projecting the adoption of that TRZ on May 25th. So the earliest we can come back to you all would likely be May 27th, which is that Thursday. And we'll talk a little bit about this later on. The city hall's going to be closed on Friday, so we've got to move our dates again. But May 27th could work if the city follows through with the TRZ and the remaining components of the financing portion come through as well. So we're hopeful May 27th.
Okay, Kurt, let me just make sure that I understand before we move forward. The decision that we're making today really is based on your recommendation on the process that we stipulated to the proposers. And our choice really today will be either to accept the best value, or is it a parent best value?
Parent best value
whatever
proposer for
term is.
for further negotiations. Yeah,
Or not select anyone.
or not so. Yes,
Those are the two
that's the
options.
choice.
And the reason for that is for us as a board to sit here and say, well, you know, we see your recommendation, but we think, you know, proposer A or B would be better. What are the consequences of that?
Well, the consequences of that are you would have to defend that, and I think the consequences are, given that we set out a very well-defined process, and I'm sure, you know, proposer A and B are, you know, proposer C is really happy with the process today. Proposer A and B would like to tweak the process some, but if they'd won, they'd have different. The problem with overriding and saying, well, I really want to take the lowest score and I don't care about the technical score, is that we'd be going against our process. Everything that we did is built toward having a fair process that everybody knows and following the rules. If we don't follow our own rules, then I would guess that we'd be subject to a challenge. I can tell you that these folks right here would follow a challenge tomorrow probably, and they would be within their rights to do that.
What about TxDOT? What about?
I think FHWA would be very upset because they've approved this process, and I've never had this happen where we kind of go rogue and don't approve it. But I would assume that they might make us start all over, rather than accept the
Recommendation.
Yeah, the recommendation. I don't think we could just assume that we could go right down the road with that.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'm ready to vote.
Mr. Tejas?
What we'll be asking of you is really authorization for the chair to execute a board resolution so that we can formalize this process. And the resolution will actually have two acts in it. The first will be to accept the recommendation of the evaluation team, which is identifying the America's Gateway Builders as the apparent best value proposer. And the second item is to authorize the executive director to commence negotiations with that apparent best value proposer. So if you don't mind, I'd like to read that resolution language into the record, and then I would ask for a motion and an action on it. Be it resolved by the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority that, pursuant to the procurement process utilized by the CRRMA for the I-10 at Loop 375 Americas Interchange Project, the CRRMA Board of Directors hereby accepts the recommendation of the evaluation team that identified the Americas Gateway Builders as the apparent best value proposer for the project, and that the executive director is hereby authorized to commence negotiations with the Americas Gateway Builders as the apparent best value proposer for the finalization of the contract documents for the design and construction of the Americas Interchange Project, consistent with all applicable federal and state statutes and rules.
So
moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? None. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Congratulations to Zachary and company. And in saying that, we want to very much thank the other two proposers. Abrams, who is the current contractor on the Liberty Expressway, formerly known as Spur 601, and also Austin Road and Bridge. We very much appreciate your input. We know how much work it is. We know how much money is spent. And, but these aren't gunfights that you win some and lose some. So we hope that we see you here again the next time that we have a project. Also, I want to very much thank Chuck Berry, the district engineer for TxDOT, and Eduardo Calvo, who have been extremely supportive, along with the rest of the staff and the administration of TxDOT. And I tell you what, I'm just here to tell you that we have a great executive director in Raymond Tejas. He has really done yeoman service on this project. So thank all of you very, very much. I guess next on the agenda is the presentation, discussion, and action regarding the RMA's Regional Toll Implementation Plan. Mr. Tejas?
As a reminder, the RMA entered into a loan agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation some time back for funds to allow us to begin review of the 2008 Comprehensive Mobility Plan toll projects. With us today is Kay McKinley, who's also part of our GEC team. She's from the firm of PBS&J, and she has spent a good amount of time over the last few months putting together the Regional Toll Implementation Plan. So with that, I'll turn this over to Ms. McKinley.
Thank you, Raymond. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pleased to be here today to present the Regional Toll Implementation Plan. We have had some meetings with you previously on some of our initial findings, and today we're presenting the final plan. So maybe you can help me with advancing this, and we can get started, Steve.
I would mention, too, that you have two handouts. One handout is the PowerPoint presentation, and the second handout is actually the plan itself. And all of these documents will be posted, as well as the PowerPoint presentation for the Americas project. All of these items will be posted online this afternoon as well.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you. First, I wanted to really cover the reason that the RMA decided that they needed to have a regional toll implementation plan. And this really has to do with being able to analyze the toll projects that were identified in your 2008 Comprehensive Mobility Plan, for us to be able to provide an understanding to you of what the projects are, kind of the configuration of the projects, the status of the development of the projects, and the estimated development and construction cost profiles for the projects in the plan. The other thing that we were charged to do was to identify the next steps. So what's it going to take for you to initiate your program? So that's what the plan is covering, and I'll step right on through that. In today's presentation, I'm going to cover these items. Just to walk through it quickly, we're going to talk about the 2008 Comprehensive Mobility Plan. We're going to talk about the toll projects in the plan, the project development and delivery process, the regulatory governance for these projects, the El Paso Metropolitan Planning Organization's role in developing these projects, the National Environmental Policy Act and how it relates to developing these projects, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, and the 2008 CMP toll projects, the further discussion on the Border Highway West project specifically, an alternative scenario that we've developed that involves congestion relief on I-10, which we're calling the auxiliary lanes on Project 14C, project cost estimates, and keeping in mind these are estimates, funds that have been identified to develop your program, the implementation scenarios that we've developed, project financing scenarios and possibilities, sources for project financing, the next steps, and I'm also going to cover today the market valuation process that's underway for Project 12, which is the Cesar-Chavez corridor. So here's something that I think you folks here in El Paso have been accustomed to looking at because it was adopted by the various agencies here and the communities here. I'm putting this up because I want to point out the projects in the Regional Toll Implementation Plan are the ones in the blue box. These are the projects that have been identified here in El Paso for user fee tolls. What you were previously talking about was another method of financing a project, has to do with design, build, and pass-through financing kind of program. Well, now we're going to talk in our plan about the toll projects, and those are the ones in the blue box, and I'll go to the next slide so you can get a better idea of their location and what they are. This is the location map that shows the tolled projects, and just to walk you through it, 14B down at the bottom end of the project is the connector that would go from I-10 over to the Border Highway and connect with the Cesar-Chavez corridor, which is Project 12. Going on up, you have the Border Highway West projects. As you move up the map, 13, 14A, and 14D. 14C is not a tolled project. It's a project that is important for connecting toll projects. The other project that we are analyzing today, or in this report, is Project 15, which is the Northeast Parkway. And I want to give you a little bit more information on what the particular boundaries are on those projects, kind of the limits of the projects. Project 12 goes from US 54 to Zaragoza. 13 runs from Park to Schuster. The Project 14A from Schuster to I-10 at the Sunland Park interchange. Project 14B is Zaragoza to I-10. Project 14C is the collector distributor, the non-tolled piece, which is shown as red on the location map. Project 14D is the phase along I-10 that runs from Sunland Park to the Loop 375 Trans Mountain. And the Northeast Parkway goes from Joe Battle Boulevard to the Texas-New Mexico line. So those are the projects that are included in the Regional Toll Implementation Plan. I think it's always important for our planning to include an overview of the project development and delivery process. What I've done here is to give an outline of the steps that we go through to develop a highway project here in Texas and around the United States. We have our project planning phases that involves being able to get the projects listed in your regional plans. So this would be something that's under the jurisdiction of the Metropolitan Planning Organization here in El Paso. And I'm going to go further into that aspect in a little bit. Then we have the preliminary engineering on projects, where we start actually designing the projects and start getting an idea of really the specifics on the project. That's something that feeds into the environmental analysis, which is another important step for developing a project. And you can see that the environmental analysis, we're kind of going back and forth between looking at a variety of alternatives in your preliminary engineering, going through an environmental process, identifying the preferred alternative, and then taking that into final design and going from that into your project delivery process. I think it's another aspect that folks always are asking me is, how long does it take to develop a highway project? And time frames can vary a great deal. But I've developed a timeline here, I think, that helps to give a little bit of an understanding of about how long we're talking about to get these projects developed. The MPO planning process ranges, and it can be put into plans annually, to once every 4 years, depending on the plan type. I'm going to go into those in a little more detail in a moment. Preliminary engineering usually averages about 18 months, depends on the complexity of the project. The environmental studies, depending on the level of environmental study, can last anywhere from 1 to 5 years, and that also has a lot to do with what kind of impacts might be discovered. Final design is usually in a 12-month time frame. And construction, again, depending on the complexity of the project, can range anywhere from about 36 to 45 months. The regulatory governance on projects is one of the things that's part of the process that takes months to accomplish often. So I wanted to give you an overview of some of the major agencies that actually have some governance over developing highway projects. The federal U.S. Department of Transportation is obviously a major player on highway projects. And under that, I have the Federal Highway Administration, the Metropolitan Planning Organization that also has federal requirements, the National Environmental Policy Act, which we all call NEPA. And another important regulatory governance that's here in Texas is the market valuation process that came out of 792, Senate Bill 792. I'm going to go into more detail in these now. The El Paso Metropolitan Planning Organization obviously has a major role in planning any transportation systems here in your area. They handle policies, planning. They're also a conduit for funding. They have 3 major plans that they're responsible for. I want to point out that each of these plans is fiscally constrained. What that means is that any project that appears in the plan, funding has to be identified for it. So if you think in terms of your 2008 Comprehensive Mobility Plan, that's separate from these other planning documents. So projects could be shown in that particular plan for which funding had not been identified yet. But one of the requirements on your other plans is that funding has to be identified. They kind of step through a process. The MTP, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, is like your long-range transportation plan. Usually goes out about 30 years in planning. Transportation Improvement Program is something that's maybe more done on a 2 to 4 year basis. And when you get down to your Unified Plan Work Program, that's sort of done maybe on about an annual basis. The National Environmental Policy Act, which we all refer to as NEPA, is a process that many folks involved in developing transportation projects are really familiar with. The process is actually controlled by the federal government, and they have strict requirements on how these particular studies must be done in order to comply with the federal regulations. Just going to give you a little overview on the major kind of levels of study under NEPA. And this is always, I think, good for folks to understand. The first level, which is the lowest level, is called categorical exclusion, and we favorably call it CE. What that means is if there's a project that's going to be developed, if it's determined that the project is very similar to many projects that have been approved before, that FHWA has already approved. If you have a similar project, you can present that to FHWA. They'll say, this is very similar to projects we've already approved. We recognize no impacts. Therefore, we'll give you a categorical exclusion, and you do not need to proceed to an environmental analysis. So that obviously is the fastest part of the process that you might incur here. The next step is the environmental analysis. We refer to that as the EA. And there's a couple of important things that could come out of an environmental analysis. The first one is what we call a FONSI, which is a finding of no significant impact. And what that means, it's a lower level study, takes a shorter period of time. The documentation on the study is presented to FHWA, and FHWA can review the documents and come back to the agency that submitted it and say, we agree, there's no significant impacts, and therefore your environmental assessment stops there, and FHWA gives their approval, so you can move forward. The larger aspect of this that can come out of the EA is the environmental impact statement, and that's known as the EIS, the Environmental Impact Statement Study. This particular aspect would be recognizing a lot of potential impacts in whatever the corridor is that you're trying to develop. And they might be impacts that have to do with commercial interest, maybe residential interest, maybe some sort of public park. Those are the kinds of things that would, and going outside of an existing right-of-way, needing to buy more right-of-way, going through an area where you don't already have right-of-way for a transportation corridor. Those are the types of things that the FHWA says you need to do a full-blown environmental impact study. So right here, and I'll get to that, the Project 12, the Cesar-Chavez corridor, has already received a FONSI that's already been approved. TxDOT was notified of that last summer. So that one's ready to go from an environmental perspective. So you won't have any further environmental analysis on that one. The final thing I've listed on here, the final requirement, is the regional toll network analysis. This is a new requirement that actually popped up last year. And I'll give you an example of how that will work here in El Paso with your projects. FHWA is now saying if you're going to develop a system of toll roads, you will have to do what they're calling a regional toll network analysis. If you're only developing one toll road, and think of your Project 12, the Cesar-Chavez corridor, they look at that as one toll road. They're not looking at what you might develop in the future. So by developing that project, you're not triggering this requirement. However, as soon as you start looking at your next project, which according to the planning we have now is going to be 14B, this particular requirement is going to be triggered. And it's going to then be incumbent upon you folks here to be able to initiate this regional study. And it's looking primarily at things like impacts on maybe lower income type communities, that sort of aspect, and looking at it from a regional way, not just a corridor way. Because an EIS is usually done looking at those impacts that are affected by a specific corridor, and those impacts are all studied, and they have to be cleared. But this is a totally different aspect. So I wanted to bring this to your attention because this is something that's going to come up in your future.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
As far as that analysis, you say it's triggered. Is that something that the RMA would do, or is that would that be a function of the MPO looking at the overall who does the?
Yeah, this is primarily a function of the MPO, so thank you for asking for that clarification. You folks obviously would have a role in that, and TxDOT would have a role in that as well, but it's primarily the responsibility of the MPO. I wanted to kind of go through the projects now, each of them, and give you an idea of their status in your regional planning documents. So now we're talking about the Metropolitan Transportation Plan 2035 and the 2008 CMP toll projects and how these things are related. So the first thing that I think is important to know is that in order for you to fully develop a toll project, it has to be in the MTP as a toll project. So the first two projects that I have on my list here, Project 12 and Project 15, both of those projects are currently in the MPO 2035 MTP as tolled projects. So those can be developed without further ado from the planning perspective. The next projects I've listed are projects, these are all projects from the 2008 CMP. These projects are listed in the 2035 long-range plan, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, but they're not in there as tolled projects. So in order for them to be fully developed as tolled projects, they're going to have to be included in the plan at some point. You can go pretty far with studying a project, doing environmental studies and that sort of thing, but then you'll finally get to a point to where you want to continue beyond that stage and you're going to have to get it into the plan.
Okay.
Yes.
Will this regional toll network analysis impact any project, regardless if it's tolled or not?
It's only for toll projects. The next one here, I'm going further down into the collector distributor. That's 14C. That's the red one on your map that collects toll to toll and connects toll to toll and non-toll or non-toll projects. That one is not tolled. It's in the plan, and it needs to be in the plan to move further. The final project is 14A. That project is not in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan at all. It's not in there. So this is some of the work that's going to need to be done between you folks, TxDOT, and the MPO in order to get these things into the plans when the timing is right to do that. I wanted to bring to your attention some changes that had occurred here in El Paso as we were going through development of the plan. This has to do with the Border Highway West projects, and those are the projects that involve 13, 14A, 14D, and again the non-toll collector distributor 14C. TxDOT informed your agency that they had decided they were going to reinitiate an environmental analysis on those projects. And what that means from the perspective of the regional toll implementation plan is that means that those are put a little bit on hold because we want now to wait until that new environmental study is done. The nature of this type of environmental study will mean they'll be looking at possibly different routes. You know, there'll be different alternative alignments that'll be looked at. There'll be a major public outreach program involved in that analysis. And so once that is completed, then you'll be able to understand again, oh, we have these projects, but they look different. There have to be new cost estimates done. You know, a lot of work will have to be done on those projects to be able to understand them. The EIS involves preliminary engineering, so it's really a major effort. But until that is settled, and that's probably going to take multiple years for that to happen, your agency is not going to be able to move forward to advance those projects until those final alignments are decided. So that's going to be a little bit of a waiting period for you. We received that information early this year, and so that's kind of the determination we made as to what would be best, how to characterize them in the plan, so that we didn't mischaracterize them, shall we say. The other thing that we have done here concerning the Border Highway West is while we're waiting for that environmental study to be launched and completed, we were asked to look at possible congestion relief over in the I-10 corridor. And we came up with a option that I'm going to discuss with you today to provide some congestion relief, and we're calling it an auxiliary lane option, and I'll be getting to that in a moment. Here it is. Those of you who live here and travel along the I-10 on a daily or weekly basis or more than once a day will recognize this particular section of I-10, which goes from Red Road over to Sunland Park Drive. The concept here is to, let me see if I can kind of draw a little picture on this. The way it looks like out there, if you're going to enter the highway from one of these roads that we have in red here on the map, you're going to enter the highway and immediately go into the main lanes of the highway. You're not going to have any kind of a merge lane or an acceleration lane or anything along the side of the highway. That's the way it looks today. So what that means for motorists is that you're coming in from a road that may be bringing 500 vehicles into the lane. You're now merging into a road that already has 1,000 vehicles. So you're immediately having those vehicle-to-vehicle conflicts by these vehicles coming into the main lane. So the concept of auxiliary lanes is to have lanes where you can actually do merging activities. So in other words, if you're entering into the road, instead of going right onto the main lanes, you're going to have a lane that's running alongside the main lanes for a period of time, gives you an opportunity to be able to run along in that. You can accelerate a little bit, and then you merge into the main lanes. Most of these types of situations involve both entering and exiting. So that's another thing that our auxiliary lanes can be very effective at doing, is to give you the opportunity to have vehicles exiting in a safer manner, coming off of the main lanes onto the auxiliary lane, and then use that to slow down before they start getting onto the ramps. So that's the concept we're talking about here. And I know you folks are familiar with that, but I just kind of wanted to walk you through it just so you could understand kind of what we were looking at. So these particular red areas here are areas where we feel that we can add auxiliary lanes. Also, in a couple of instances, we have determined that maybe we could take a one-lane exit ramp and turn it into 2 lanes, because there's space to do it, and also it's feeding into a roadway where that can accommodate that. So we were looking at really congestion relief in this particular area. The other thing that's important here is because the EIS is coming, we did not want to suggest any congestion relief in this area that would have any impact on the EIS study. This particular work is really low-level work and can be done and will not impact the EIS study. So that's why we came up with this, and we'll be talking about this a little bit more from a cost and schedule aspect as well. So this next slide is really talking about the benefits of having auxiliary lanes to help relieve congestion, and also they're considered to be a good safety measure too. So just wanted to, this kind of explains a little bit what I was just talking about, allows that weaving for exiting vehicles and merging for entering vehicles rather than just slam, you're in the main lanes. So the next slide is a slide that is based on project cost estimates for the toll projects. And you can see in the header, we're saying this is in 2009 dollars. What's really important when you're thinking about estimating costs for any project that's going to be done in the future is to understand what your baseline is and to understand what your escalation rates are for projects. Most of these estimates here are estimates that were done by TxDOT for these projects. We have done quite a bit of additional work working with TxDOT on Project 12, the Cesar-Chavez, to really understand, more about their designs, more about their cost estimates, so that we could come to some reconciliation. We've been working on that over the last month. So just to walk you through this, the Cesar-Chavez corridor to be able to develop the project, design the project, build the project, we're talking about $105 million. Projects 13 and 14A have been combined in the cost estimating as one project. TxDOT took that action initially because they're connected, and it's what makes sense on those projects. The way it stands right now, the estimate on that is ranging about $674 million, but those are two projects, obviously, that are going to be subjected to the new EIS study, so those are going to change, but we're kind of going with what we have today on that. Project 14B is estimated at around $38 million, $2009. The auxiliary lane concept that I just mentioned to you, and we're still kind of at a conceptual level on that. We haven't done detailed engineering work on that. We're estimating that one at about $13 million in $2009. That was the congestion relief that we just talked about. 14C, the collector distributor, if that one were done the way it's designed now, it'd be about $143 million. 14D is going to run you around $197 million. And 15, which is the Northeast Parkway, it's going to be about $269 million. We have we have about 4 different categories here. You'll probably notice that on some of these projects, some of the work has already been completed, and on others it hasn't. You'll also notice that some of the costs of some of the work that needs to be done to develop the projects will be borne by others, and mostly the others is the district of TxDOT. But I just wanted to point that out to you. What we're talking about here for your program as it sits today is an estimated cost of about $1.4 billion, and that's in 2009 dollars again. So I know that these numbers have been here. You know, this isn't all new news, but I wanted to really go through this again in our presentation. This is part of the plan. All right, flipping over to when funds are available to develop the projects. And these are again, we're talking about still the 2008 CMP projects, Comprehensive Mobility Plan projects. The El Paso MPO has identified funds in 2 different categories that are going to be available for the tolled projects, the ones that are in the plan. And the initial currently available funds that have been identified is $79 million, which is dedicated to Project 12, the Cesar-Chavez corridor. Future funds that have been identified is $151 million, and those funds are going to be available in accordance with the list that I have on the slide. So in 2015, $81 million of that is going to become available to develop projects, start funding projects. In 2018, another $45 million is going to become available. And in 2019, $24 million is going to become available from that $151 million. So recognizing that you have a pretty big program here, and funding that's been identified thus far is a little short of that, doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to develop your program. It means other sources of funding, obviously can be found in various ways. And we'll talk more about that too. But we came up with 2 implementation scenarios that I'd kind of like to walk you through. And what we're trying to do in these implementation scenarios is to tell you that in your regional toll plan, as we're delivering it today and discussing it today, does not include any funding allocated to those Border Highway West projects. With the exception, we do have one scenario where we actually are going to fund those congestion relief improvements that I talked about. So our scenario 1 is focused on the fact that in 2012, according to the current plan of available funding, none of the $151 million is going to be available. So what that means with what the red bar is showing is that there's $79 million that's been identified for Project 12 that's available now, it's currently available, but you're going to need more to develop that project. And the red bar and the shortfall is showing we're in the range of 33 million shortfall to develop that project. We're going to talk today about your next steps and kind of what's going to be some of the action items for your agency to start working on how to overcome some of these shortfalls in funding, because there's obviously methods to do that. But we wanted to be clear in our chart here to let you know that these funds are not enough to complete that project, because the 151 simply is not available soon enough, according to our latest information. So that's what you're seeing here. The other part of this that is good for you to know is that 14B can be funded, can be designed and completed and constructed, and that project can open in 2018. So you can see that project we've identified funding that can go to that project. The other aspect of this scenario is acquiring right-of-way for the Northeast Parkway. This particular scenario, you could actually acquire the right-of-way for that project. You would even end up with a little bit of surplus after doing these things. That surplus, we would recommend that you could use that to start doing some of the preliminary engineering work on the Border Highway West projects as those go through the environmental process. So that might be a good way to start getting the development going on those projects. But, you know, these are decisions, obviously, that you folks would be making. I kind of wanted to give you what some of the options are. Let me go to scenario 2, and then we can talk about these more. Excuse me just a minute. Because the Border Highway West projects are now going to be involved in the new environmental study, we don't have any funds for those, so we were really trying to come up with some other options that we thought might help you to advance your program. 14B on 14C, 14B, excuse me, 14B on here, same as the first scenario. That one's going to be completed and opened in 2018. So you've got a great project going there. The other project that we have on this scenario, which we didn't have previously, is the aux lanes that we were talking about, the auxiliary lanes or the acceleration lanes. You can actually complete those also and offer some congestion relief on the I-10. So that would be another aspect of what you folks could do with the funding available. On the Northeast Parkway, you could purchase part of the right-of-way on the Northeast Parkway in this scenario. You'd end up with a little bit of shortfall in 2020. So this, I want to emphasize, this is only funds that are identified as being available. And one of the things that is exciting for me to be working with you folks is you're going to be building out a system. So when you start building out a system, you're starting with one project, and that's how you grow that project. Then you're looking at how that project can be successful, maybe can even have some excess revenues to think about other projects. But these are some of the options that you'll be thinking about, and how are we going to come up with additional funding. So those are the two scenarios we have here, and it's a little bit limited. But this is what we've come up with, is the way we think that you could spend your money and advance your program. Just to go a little bit further into what this means. Project 12, we've identified that shortfall of $33 million. That's based on the current project estimates, cost estimates, to develop and build the project. And we have that shortfall has come out of work that our company has been doing. We've also had a lot of coordination with the district on some of these as well. But that shortfall is recognized from the work that your GEC has been doing in order to develop the project. Also, you noticed that we were able to open 14B, as I was talking about, in 2018, so you could have that piece open. And then I'm again just mentioning the scenarios, what they are, and acquiring the right-of-way. And then scenario 2 is really you can develop that congestion relief project on 14C. You can require some right-of-way, but you'll have a little shortfall when you get to 2020. So that's pretty much what the scenarios are. And I thought it might be really advantageous if, depending on your time elements here, Mr. Chair, talk a little bit about maybe some financial sources. We have a lot of this in the plan, very detailed in the plan, but there are a variety of ways that you can get more funds to develop your program through federal funds, through loans, bonds, other types of funds. And one of the things that has been really effective here in Texas is this pass-through financing concept. So that might be something that you would consider actually as part of, developing your program a little more quickly. So just wanted to mention those are some of the aspects. Some of the next steps we've been talking about. I'm going to talk next about the market valuation process on Project 12, give you a little overview of that and the status on that. The other thing is, in order for you to be able to develop the projects and understand their revenue potential and understand the total feasibility aspect of the projects, you need to perform traffic and revenue studies. And Project 12 has had traffic and revenue study. Sketch planning has been done on 14B, but you really do not have current traffic and revenue on the other projects. So as the EIS moves forward and you get a better understanding of what the alignments are, that's obviously a program you want to enter into. So you can start getting a better idea of the revenue potential. On Project 15, since the alignment is pretty much set, you could perform traffic and revenue studies on that any time, and a total feasibility analysis could be done that takes into consideration the capital cost of the project and the life cycle cost to operate the project over a given period of time. Market valuation, Senate Bill 792. I put this flow chart in here that was really developed for a different client, but I think it's just a good flow chart to sort of give you an idea of just an overview of what this means. What Senate Bill 792 is focused on is what is the value of the project that an agency like yours, a regional mobility authority, might take over from TxDOT and develop. And Senate Bill 792 said that project has to be valued. So the process of going through valuation is what I have in the flow chart here, is that both the RMA and TxDOT has to come up with what they think is the estimated cost to develop the project. You have to obviously discuss those things and determine those things. There comes a point when you can actually pull the trigger for market valuation and the clock starts running, so you have a lot of other steps you have to go through. But there's three important aspects of this that also have to go to the MPO. It's the project scope, the toll rates, and the toll escalation. Those are agreed upon between your agency and TxDOT, and they also go to the MPO for consideration as well. That's part of the requirement in Senate Bill 792. Now, I want to sort of truncate this a little bit, because if it's determined between your agency and TxDOT that the project has zero value or less, negative value, market valuation stops. You do not go through the market valuation process because both have agreed that the project does not have a positive value. Now, you still go through the process with the MPO of the project scope, the toll rates, and the escalation. So there's sort of different points where you opt out of this process and you move forward to other processes, other agreements. So that kind of in a nutshell is the process that we're going through right now on Project 12. And we're working closely with the district on that process. And the next slide just gives you sort of a rundown of what goes into these. I talked about the business terms that include the project scope, the toll rates, and the toll escalation. Those are the three things required from Senate Bill 792. The financial analysis that we are conducting now in conjunction with the district. We're then coming up with the capital costs, the life cycle costs, and what the toll revenue expectation is for the project. And then I've mentioned here at the last two bullets what I was saying before. If the project is zero or negative, the MV, the market valuation stops. And you continue on with agreements then that you can decide whether you're still going to take primacy of the project. There's a lot of other steps that you can go through. This is kind of where we are at the moment on Project 12. So, thank you.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Questions?
It's a lot to digest.
Should I start over again?
Could you go over that one more time?
Yeah.
If I could interject,
Yes.
Adjust for when you're using 2009 dollars and you're looking 3, 4, 10 years ahead. How do you reconcile that, and what factors do you use?
What do we use? Let me go back to this slide, Ms. Melendez, and we have escalation rates in here that we're using. The way we come up with this is through an economic analysis process. We're looking at a lot of indices like CPI and those kind of indices, but we're also running into different aspects of escalation. So where it might be agreed by economists, and we have those folks in our company, as well as we're looking at outside research that's being done, that the escalation rate for construction costs, for example, might be, 5 cents a year. When we're actually looking at tolling equipment, which is really the large technology component of these toll road projects, we're ratcheting that down into a different escalation rate. And we've been doing a lot of studies on this in the last month because the recession is having a pretty big impact on some of those things. But what we do is look at the last 50 years cycle on escalation rates and then try to peg our rates that we're going to use for escalation on an annual basis to those rates. So let me go over here. I think it's the next slide. I had those. See if I can find those here. Excuse me just a second. Not sure if I'm going in the right direction. On that one. We ended up with 5% for the construction. One of the things that happens is when you're looking at 50 years, if you have an escalation rate of 5% over a 50-year period, by the time you get to the end of that, the number's huge. So another aspect in the economics of this is saying, well, maybe the escalation rate for the first 20 years should be at that higher rate, but then as you get further out, maybe it should be a little bit lower. With economists, there's always kind of different perspectives, shall we say. They don't all agree. But we've essentially come up with a couple of different things, one for the construction, one for the right-of-way, and one for the toll technology equipment. So in the construction, we ended up at 3.5, for the right-of-way at 5%, and for the toll technology equipment, 2.75. But that's how we came up with this. It's really going through a really pretty intensive economic study. Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
Mm-hmm.
The difference in Project 12, we currently have $79 million allocated for that project. We've got $106 million cost, and we're showing a shortfall of $33 million. The difference in the 2009 dollars as opposed to anticipating when that project could move forward?
There's a couple of aspects there. The major differences between the $79 million, which are the funds available, and what we've come up with, the estimated cost for the project, are really kind of two factors. One has to do with tolling equipment. In order to implement a dynamically priced managed lane project, it takes additional tolling equipment. That's one big difference. That number's about $8 million. So if you look at the $79 million, put $8 million onto that, that's a big number. Another number that's making a difference is the difference in contingency. Because this project is not designed, it's about half designed, maybe, shall we say. Maybe we're in the 40 to 50% range of design, and it's further away from being completely designed. We came up with a contingency of 15%. In working with the district, their contingency is 10%. So those are the two major factors that are making a difference in this cost in $2,009. The other thing that can make a difference is what you're talking about, is each year when the activity occurs, obviously, that's when the escalation factors come into play. And so by the time you finally develop a project, it costs more than where you started. And obviously you understand that. But just to let you understand kind of what those major differences are today, it's those two big issues.
Did I hear you say that with the kind of the increase in technology, that the actual tolling costs, or that the cost of that tolling technology is not rising at at that factor of 5 or 4% compared to other construction costs?
This is what our economists in the research that's been done have told us is the best way for us to look at that particular equipment. And so yes, that's what we've decided, that would be a lower escalation rate. While this isn't similar to some other technology that we use on a daily basis, I think there is some, comparison that can be made when you think about some of the cost of these flat screen TVs when they start at a very high rate, and then they come down. There's a certain aspect of that in this equipment, but there's another aspect, I think, in this equipment that maybe is even more relevant, is that they're constantly improving the technology, and that's bringing the price down by doing that. That sounds like an odd seesaw effect, but that's what the economic studies show is really going on. So that's why we're using a lower escalation rate. The other aspect of this that I haven't mentioned yet, thinking of the toll equipment, it has to be replaced around every 12 or 15 years. So when you get around to replacing it, the economists are telling us that you're going to have a lower cost to replace similar equipment. So that's another aspect. There's about a half dozen things in these economic studies that we've been reviewing that led us to this decision. I can provide you more background on that. I'd be happy to do that. And that way you could review it. And if you had any further questions, you could let us know. Okay.
Other questions? If not, Mr. Tess, what do we need to do today?
I probably should have started the presentation by that. By way of history, this item has already gone through the executive committee, and it came out of there with a recommendation to bring it forward to the board for action. The action that we'll be requesting of you is that you accept the report, and the full report is provided as backup. You accept the report and forward it on to the planning committee. The planning committee is really the committee where I'm asking that this item be fully vetted, and the planning committee members can go through the report in detail. We can spend as much time as they're interested in going through the plan so that we can develop or decide which implementation approach can come back to the full board. So at this point, I would ask that a motion be made to accept the report and forward it on to the planning committee.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Kay, thank you very, very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Pleased to be here today.
Item number 7 is discussion and action on the Executive Director's report. Mr. Executive Director?
Raymond Tejas again, for the record. Item 7A deals with our 2009 annual report. As you'll recall, I believe it was 2 meetings back, this body authorized the staff to go out and finalize the 2009 annual report and have it published and distributed. On the table, there should be some left, I believe, final published copies of the 2009 annual report for the public. We've also added it to our website, so the annual report is out there. And in fact, Mr. Chair, I've got some letters ready for you to sign so I can begin making deliveries to the elected officials here in town. Okay. So I wanted to, for the public, make note that the 2000 annual report is ready and is online. We have hard copies for anybody who's interested. So no action is required on that item. 7B, no action is required on this item either. This is our quarterly financial report. Included in your backup, you'll actually find the first quarter and the second quarter. No action is required, but subject to your questions. This is, as you recall, Mr. Marcus, as the chair of the Finance Committee, asked for certain revisions to be made to the format. So those have been implemented, and you'll see those in the documents you have before you. So there's no action on that unless you all have any questions. Item 7C, I mentioned this briefly earlier. The City Hall will actually be closed on Fridays from May through September, so we're going to have to find a new date. And actually, I think I mentioned also, the next meeting will likely be on May 27th, unless you all have any objection to that. That is a Thursday, and the problem that we've had to date is that Thursdays are the days that City Council has selected for their legislative review committees. So if we were to schedule a meeting on a Thursday and a legislative review committee decided to meet on that Thursday, we would be bumped, which is why I tried to avoid that early on. The problem we have now is that Fridays are now out also. Wednesdays are taken up with procurement, bid openings, and that sort of thing. So for now, I'm actually not going to ask for any action. I'm going to go back and sit with the city clerk to see if we can't find a date that works best for all of us. But as far as May, I'm looking for May 27th. So if you all will kind of tentatively pencil that into your calendar, and hopefully we'll have an agreement to sign on that date. So I'll be back with this item. And D is just something I wanted to mention to you all. The local government project procedures training is a required training that has come down from TxDOT, and it's required of anyone who receives federal funds, including federal stimulus funds. As you know, we're receiving stimulus funds, the CRRMA dollars for the Americas interchange. I recently took that training, and as did one of our GEC members, Mr. Jacobs over there. So we took the training, we're certified, and we're now certified to submit invoices. So that was a very important training that we took, and it's important that you know that we can.
Was it tough?
It was extremely difficult. It was 12 hours worth of training, so yes, it was tough. I just wanted to mention that. There's really not much else from me.
It's a good thing you didn't tell us we had to go do it.
That's right. That's right. So subject to your questions, that's all I have.
Any questions?
Nope.
If not, I believe that completes our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.